pleasure and honor to introduce our panelists that will share their knowledge and experiences with us. So in Sweden, we have Bo Gustafsson, who is the artistic director and founder of a communication studio, DVA. In Denmark, it's Kirsten Drotner, who is a researcher at the Department of the Study of Culture and Media at the University of Southern Denmark. In Norway, we have Nikita Matias, who is a senior concept developer at the Munch Museum.
Hello, everybody.
In Finland, we have Gregoire Russo, who is an artist and educator, and is the founder of a platform Station of Commons. And in France, Paris, so we are in the same city, not so far away, Ozan, who is the artistic co-director of the Gaieté Lyrique. So when reading the presentation that has been put together by the French Institute for this roundtable, one can easily see that it raises really different aspects and issues about digital technologies in relation to museum, such as, and this is a really short list of questions. The first one for me is, what is it that we mean under the label digital museum? Between online things about analog and digital objects, on-site element, nomad, such as exhibition on USB memory stick, for instance. So what is it exactly, this digital museum? And what are exactly also the goals of those quote unquote digital enhancement? Is it about communication, building Instagram stories? Is it about mediation, guiding the audience through an exhibition or an event? Education, providing in-depth knowledge about something? Entertainment, aesthetic experience, something else also? And is it enhancing the experience, the knowledge, the content, the audience, and probably more? So in order to try to untangle those threads, I've asked our panelists to first present what they do and to give an example of something that has been successful, according to them, in their activity or research. So in other words, to be in this sharing of good practice. So I would like to tell the audience that I can't see. Please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom. And Eleonore Arnoux and Marie Profit from the French Institutes will help me forward your questions to our panelists at the end of the first of their presentations. So first I'm inviting, before that, I would like to say that we are very interested in this. This roundtable is really about a network and a multilateral and diplomatic wording, a multilateral exchanges between our countries, our experiences, and really sharing experience and practice. So our first speaker this afternoon is Bo Gustafsson from the communication studio DVA. Bo, please.
Thank you very much, Anik. I'll start my screen sharing and my presentation. All right, everyone can see this, right? All right, good. Hi, my name is Bo Gustafsson. I'm the creative director and co-founder of DVA. I've been working the last 20 years building interactive experiences for clients around the world. And 3 years ago, I co-founded DVA together with 4 former colleagues. And Our company is a creative technology studio, and our approach to our work is that we combine communication and technology in that sense that we all have a background in communication, whether it's working with advertising or film production, but also a secondary interest in technology. But the technology is always secondary and not something we are selling to our clients. It's all about the communication part. And we started DVA with a vision that would run through every project that we took on, and that is to challenge the limitations of reality. And that means that we often ask ourselves, how would this work if we're not constricted to the rules and limitations of the physical world? How would this work without the sci-fi gimmicky use of immersive technology, but for an everyday user? And that's something that had been able to given us the opportunity to work with a lot of clients, very exciting projects, only for the last 3 years. And of course, the French Institute is one of them. And today I want to talk about the cultural experiences and how they can be enhanced with virtual or immersive technologies. So I was asked to talk about something that I would consider best practice. And it all started with this book. It was published in 1905 by Hjalmar Söderberg. It's a Swedish classic called Dr. Glas. It's been reworked and rewritten many times. It has been rewritten into a film many times. This one is from 1968. It has been rewritten into a theater play, a stage monologue. And here is performed by Christer Henriksson at the Dramaten only a few years ago. And we did another rewrite of that same piece together with the same director and Christer Henriksson to launch a new platform for location-based audio walks. So we were able to use Dr. Glas together with Dramaten as a featured premiere on this platform. And what it is that it's actually, it's an audio walk as we all know it, but it is immersive and fully interactive. So the story unfolds at the actual location it was originally written for. So this novel, for instance, is based, it's taking place in Stockholm. And the only way to listen to it in this platform is that you go to the same location as the characters are in the novel. So when you're standing on the bridge, you will hear that chapter that plays out on that bridge. You're walking on the same streets, you're sitting in the same parks, looking at the same views, and sometimes, like in Stockholm, some of the views have completely changed from 100 years ago, but it's still in that same world. So using both GPS technology and augmented reality, we create a seamless experience for the user, and they only have to follow the map and the story will be told for them. It also happens to be very corona safe because you don't have to go to a theater or a cinema. You can enjoy this at your own time, at your own pace. And I want to show you a little snippet of what it actually looks like. It's in Swedish, but it has English subtitles.
Människorna skulle nog ha mindre förtroende för mig om de visste hur illa jag sover. Jag hade mina vägar ut mot Skeppsholmen. Och där satt hon. Satt på ett av de nedre trappstegen utanför kyrkporten. Hon grät. Sen sa hon, jag har fått en så förfärlig avsky för min man. Jag skulle kunna mörda den mannen. Jag har lovat att hjälpa henne. Och då måste prästen bort.
Okay, so this is an audio walk that adapts to the user. It adapts to you, to your walking pace, and not the other way around. If you're walking slow, it will fill out beats with music. If you're walking faster, it will cut the transitions shorter and make you keep the correct pace. It will wait for you if you decide to go for lunch or do some shopping in the middle of it. But it's important that this story, you get the same kind of precise timing as you do on as the stage play, but in your own time and in your own pace. So there is, of course, a lot of advanced code and clever production techniques in use to keep it as simple as this for the user. You just have to follow the guide in the app. And the technology under the hood is, of course, completely invisible for the user or the audience. Thank you for this. I hope that was under 7 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bo. I'm going to have one question for you. Do you have any measure, or do you know who the audience has been for this experience, and who the people were that used it?
So, I mean, the target audience was, of course, the same as the regular audience for Dramaten, which is very, very wide. So with that in mind, we had to design it so that audience could actually use this app. So just making it easier and easier and easier to use, and just taking away functionality to keep it into bare minimum that everyone could understand and also use without too much of onboarding and instructions. And the reception has been really, really well. I don't know if I'm supposed to say, but we have sold more than 1,000 units, and it's available on both platforms. So for us, that's really good. And it's a long-term commitment for them. So now, maybe everyone is not aware, but in Stockholm, it's getting very, very dark and cold. The days are very short. So we think this spring would be the big time for people to be out walking and enjoying this.
And a very good question, Bill, on the same one. Did you get new audiences that never went to the drama or theater plays before? Could you measure that?
That's very hard to measure for us. Just by going on gut feeling and what we've seen on social media, I would definitely say that we have reached a new audience. I don't have any actual proof of that, but when just any weekend and you go down to the starting place, we will see people show up there, and like we're just kind of stealthy looking in the background and see if people understand what they're doing, and we see a wide range of audience. But Dramaten already have a wide range of audience. So, and I'm not that, I think they know much more if they have reached a newer or another audience than me.
Okay, well, thank you. And I've lost Nikita. Oh yeah, he's here on my screen. So Nikita Matias is our next speaker. And Nikita is from the Munch Museum.
Yes, thank you, Annika. I hope everybody can see my screen that I just shared. So like it has been said, I work at Munch as a concept developer at the Department of Learning. Munch is formerly known as the Munch Museum. We as an institution own the biggest Edvard Munch collection in the world, with around 27,000 original artworks by Edvard Munch. So he was not only an extremely productive artist, but he's also considered to be the most important Norwegian artist that ever lived, and in general, one of the most important modern artists on a global scale, who also gave important impulses to artistic movements like symbolism and expressionism. And towards the end of his life, Edvard Munch donated nearly all of his works and his possession to the municipality of Oslo, which is pretty much the foundation of our museum today. What is exciting about Munch, about our organization at the moment, is that some big changes are about to happen, because we are moving to a new museum building, which is going to be much more centrally located, much bigger, much more exhibition space to show more of our collection, to show a lot more contemporary art, to show Munch together with other modern artists. And of course, this big caesura within the history of our organization is also a great opportunity to kind of think anew and redefine also what the role of Munch is within a global context and when it comes to digital and using digital technologies. So that's very exciting. Just two brief quotes from our overall mission and strategy. So on the one side here, with Edvard Munch's art, we enrich the lives of people worldwide. And our mission is that no one leaves Munch uninspired. So on the one hand, we say that, of course, our local audience is very important to us. And we've really been trying hard in the last years to have a greater outreach locally. But at the same time, we also see ourselves as a global brand and Munch as an artist with a global outreach. And of course, digital has to play a very important part within this self-understanding of our organization. So when it comes to digital, then I would like to present two important distinctions that we're working with. The first one is more regarding different channels or media, you could say, that we're working with, which is to create experiences that take place on site, which could be like something immersive or interactive within an exhibition space, on device, which could be an audio guide, for instance, and online, which could be experiences posted on social media or on our website. But then perhaps more importantly, we work strategically towards three digital areas. The first one being digital content, which is all the content that we produce for already existing channels and media, such as Facebook, Instagram, and so on. Then we got the area digital innovation, which is everything that requires software development. So this could be an app, could be something immersive on site, could be different things. And then the third part is the most encompassing one, which is what we call digital transformation, which is to change the entire organization to make us more effective, more agile, more user-centered, to be better at using digital tools, apply more technology, and activate our users and visitors in a greater way. So this is kind of like the field that we're dealing with. At last, I would like to mention one particular project that we've been quite happy with, even though it hasn't been concluded yet. It's still ongoing. It has the working title Munch, and it's an app for both mobile and tablet, which we are developing for all Norwegian school children between the age of 9 and 11. So we want to reach out to all children in Norway, especially those who don't have the opportunity to come to visit us at the Munch Museum. It's an AR, augmented reality-based experience that also combines analog activities such as drawing, painting, picture making with digital activities. And for this experience, we draw on two artistic or two practices or two aspects of Munch's artistry. The first one being that a lot of Munch's paintings and works seem like they're unfinished, they're very raw and open. And this is something that Munch was heavily criticized for already in his lifetime. And so we really want to play on that and encourage children to see that not being perfect, leaving things a bit unfinished and a bit roughed up can actually be something very productive and creative, and you don't have to perform perfectly all the time. And the second aspect being Munch's close relation to specific places. because Munch regularly revisited places in Norway, in France, in Germany, and painted them again and again. So he had this really close relationship with places like Paris and Berlin and Oslo. And of course, while we try to reach out to all children in Norway, we also want to really emphasize this aspect that you can also interact creatively with your direct environment wherever you are. So to be a bit more precise, what the experience is first you create images together in class by drawing or painting. Then you would use the app to scan the picture, and then you can place those pictures into your surroundings, and then you can go on and edit and remix those pictures, both the pictures that you created and the pictures of your environment in which these images are placed. And all these images that people created are also visible to others. So it really all feeds into a big database and really turns it into a very collective experience, which we think is nice. And what we are so happy about with this project is that the design process itself has been very user-centered from start to finish. It has been based on thorough user research, has been very iterative, where we did prototyping again and again, user testing in order to adjust and fine-tune and to arrive at a product that we can be happy with. And this, to conclude, is how we want to do projects and work at Munch in general in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikita. I'm going to ask somehow the same question I asked Bo. What kind of feedback did you get from your audience?
Yeah, like I said, the experience hasn't been launched yet. We've had different test groups, user groups, school children here in Norway. So we've been working closely with some communal areas, some particular schools. And of course, when you start off with the first prototype, you're not getting merely positive reactions at first, but that's exactly the point where you get feedback, you fine tune, you readjust. We also worked with a couple of different directions and concept parallel, and we tested out which one of these the children responded best to. For instance, we also went a bit more in the direction of experimenting with emojis in order to communicate and be creative. But then we found out that this more creative part where children get to do their own images and remix them and edit them works much better. So I would say reactions have been mixed, but that's how it's supposed to be when you do prototyping.
Okay, and another question, how do you deal with the languages issue between your different audiences, between the local and the global language? Do you translate everything, or?
Well, the plan for now is to launch this app only in Norway, and we distribute it to an existing channel, which is a network and a funding scheme for cultural experiences for school children. So we actually don't have to worry so much about the distribution part. So for now, it's not planned to be launched on an international scale, but of course, we're very open to that if we see that the app and the experience is being a success for all children in Norway. And then once we've done that, we can think about maybe doing new iterations on an international scale. And of course, then language will be a tough nut to crack, I'm sure, and it will require a lot of work.
Thank you, Nikita.
You're welcome.
And okay, here she is. So now I would like to welcome Kirsten Drotner from Denmark. So Kirsten, the floor is yours. Unmute yourself, Kirsten.
Thank you very much. I think I'd like to start by saying that I think that when we talk about digital museums, it's very important to keep in mind that for most people, the digital and the real world are very interconnected. So when we talk about advancing audience experiences, it's very important to keep in mind that we're really talking about communication here. Whatever the museum's objectives are, be it education or entertainment or engagement, the digital is a way of interacting for the museum with the surrounding world. And therefore, it's important to keep in mind that it's all about communication, really. So since I'll be very brief, I'll start just to give you my key points here, that it's important when we innovate museum communication, which is often what we do through technology, to put people first and not put technology first. Also, secondly, that it's important to integrate systematic evaluation into our processes of innovation. A lot of time and energy and money has been put into projects of innovation, and often with the objective of widening audience participation, but not always following up with systematic evaluations whether or not you reached your objectives. So if you don't remember anything else from my presentation, I'd hope you could take away these 2 points here. The background for these key points is I am a scientific director of the R Museum program, which is a national Danish research and development program. It encompasses 13 different projects, and they are all about co-developing and co-creating new forms of interaction at museums, be it online or on-site. And we are really concerned with how to foster cultural citizenship through museum communication. So this is our group. You can see there we're funded by the Nordea Foundation and the Velux Foundation, 2 big private foundations in Denmark, and then all the major Danish universities who are also participating, and 8 different museums. So we co-design with our partner museums, we implement what we design with museums, and then we evaluate. So let me move on just to flag up some of the kind of key learning points from our many projects. So let me start by showing you a museum which is not one of our partner museums, but it's the Witch Museum, a very new museum in Denmark. And I show you this image because I think it is an example of a very prominent trend in museum innovation, particularly when you use digital technologies, which is that you use digital technologies to personalize the museum experience. And it's also a trend that often puts mobile individual technologies at the center of the user experience. And I think this is a good example of the way in which particular technologies do afford particular experiences. And I think that's very, very important when we co-design and develop new museum audience experiences, that we keep that in mind, that technologies are not innocent. They always come with particular types of experiences. So you can see here that this is a very individualized, personalized experience, and it's very dependent on people having a mobile phone, which is a bit similar to the head-mounted virtual reality examples that we also know from many museums around the world. Secondly, I think this example also demonstrates that this trend towards personalization goes very much against what we know from research. When we take a user-centered perspective, we'll often see that people think about museum visits as a very social experience. So we need to be mindful of the fact that if we want to take a user-centered approach, we need to bear in mind that we also need to develop technologies that afford those kinds of experiences. So with this in mind, I'll give you a brief example of one of our projects at the R Museum program, which is the Tycho Brahe Planetarium, Copenhagen, Denmark, where we co-designed their new permanent exhibition, which actually won the Excite Sustainable Success Award in 2018. We were conscious of the fact that we wanted a social experience, and we wanted to have more diversity in terms of what is often considered very narrow subject matter in terms of astrophysics. So what we did was that we had this human-centered narrative going through the exhibition of everything that we are made of here, everything that you are made of actually comes from outer space. And that was one way in which you could connect to people's experiences with wider groups than normally would think that astrophysics is key. So we co-developed in a usual co-design iterative process where we also had a diverse group of people coming in, giving advice, tweaking our development process. And very importantly, this meant that we could, through the development phase, we could also integrate ways of evaluating what people experienced and give feedback to the planetarium along the way. So I think this is an indication that you can use in a sense extended reality or use technology to extend the physical reality and enhance the social experience. So my final takeaway here is that it's one of the challenges for many museums who innovate through digital technologies is that there's a lot of initiatives, but often initiatives are not followed up by systematic evaluation. So what we have found with our partner museums is that there's a real need for practice-based tools of evaluation that can be practiced very easily in a day-to-day kind of museum work. And not all museums are big and national and have a lot of funding and money. So it also is to be used for projects that are at smaller museums, which also are some of our partner museums, very small museums. So we are at pains to develop also qualitative tools for systematic evaluation along the way and give systematic feedback to museums, because again, digital technologies hold a lot of promises, but not all museums have the experiences and the requisite resources to harness those possibilities. So I think these partnerships that I think many museums currently develop are very important to have a diversity of input. It could be, as in our case, from university experiences, but also, of course, technical developers and so on and so forth. So I think this is an important way forward to foster interdisciplinary processes of collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. I think you raised a very key question with the this idea of evaluation and also sharing. I mean, all those are very individual experiences. Something which struck me also is people first and not technology, sure. But it raises also the questions or the definition of what a museum is. And we will probably go into this question later, because originally museums were created to conserve, to preserve the artifacts that they were collecting. And then they moved to, oh, we're sharing our collections with the public. And now we don't share anymore the collections, we are sharing audience experience. So I think this is something quite challenging. Maybe there is a need for a redefinition of what a museum is. But this is a comment, not not the question. So my question would be, when you talk about people first and evaluation, you talk about an audience in general, but what is your experience? Because in what you have done, audience are plural. It goes from kids to specialized audience that have knowledge, to people that are just here to come around, to people who know nothing, of all ages. So can we, in your experience, how can you differentiate for all these audience using the same device that you're providing them?
I think in our experience, we have been going for 5 years now. So what the feedback that we get from our partner museums is that they absolutely, as you indicate, Annick, they absolutely need more nuanced tools of understanding audiences as a backdrop to their innovative communication efforts. And at the moment, the standard perception is often visitor studies, which is very individualized and doesn't really capture the social nature of much what is we can discuss what a museum is, but at least in the standard understanding of museums, both online and on site, the challenge is really to develop much more nuanced and much more tools that are easier to capture the divergences and the differences and are much closer to people's everyday lives. And the standard tools of quantitative surveys, you give people a piece of paper to fill out after, were you happy, were you not so happy, did you disagree, do you not disagree? I mean, all of these approaches in our experience don't really help museums in their efforts to understand the audience better. So what we have been doing is to develop, for example, as Bo also indicated, and Nikita, the systematic understanding and methodology development of involving potential audiences in the developmental phase, in the co-designing phase, and to use that as a backdrop for evaluation, and to do that in a systematic fashion. And so we're developing tools for that. And I just indicated some of our results that we give back to museums for that. Unfortunately, still in Danish. So hopefully they'll be available to a wider audience later.
Thank you, Kirsten. So our next speaker in this roundtable is Jos Ozan from the Gaîté Lyrique in Paris. Jos.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the invitation. So my name is Jos Ozan. I'm artistic director and curator at Gaîté Lyrique in Paris since the starting point in 2011. So La Gaîté Lyrique is a 10 years old cultural and multi-faced institution in Paris that specializes in emerging forms of digital culture and the dialogue between music, media art, technology, research, and social issues. La Gaîté Lyrique is part of a new generation of venues in France and in Europe that demystify culture, technology, and knowledge for adults and children alike in a friendly atmosphere. La Gaîté Lyrique has this role of transmission and connection in our fast-paced era, creating links and building bridges, especially via two main aspects. The first one is about understanding and helping to understand the digital world, its cultural implication and its impacts on development decisions in our ever-changing society. Understanding that these cultures, sometimes called post-internet cultures, are not only about technology, but are above all a culture that is currently being built collectively. Our second mission aspect is giving space to the ephemeral popular cultures emerging in our post-internet world. These cultures are born, then adapt and transform themselves thanks to online media and innovative technologies. For us, they are not secondary figures, but rather mediation tools to interpret the digital era, because they are affecting our conception of the world. And all these forms of art seem to us the best option to help articulate technological stakes with political and cultural issues. A place like La Gaîté Lyrique in France contributes to bringing legitimacy to this popular culture, making them more visible, audible, tangible, and help them to get better known through events, multidisciplinary events, exhibitions, shows, talks, screenings, or workshops, which are putting the visitors at the core of the experiences. To illustrate all this, I will give you two examples of this sort of multi-format project we've produced, putting the digital technologies simultaneously as medium, cultural matter, mediation experience, and as artistic digital language. The first one is called Capitaine Futur, and is not easy to summarize in a few minutes, but I will try. So La Gaîté Lyrique is a place where children are more than welcome, while some museums can be slightly frightened by this unpredictable audience. On our side, we view education in digital technology or digital literacy as a vital means of empowering citizens of tomorrow, and art as a laboratory for the future, exploring approaches to living, doing things together, and confronting the changes at hand proactively. They are the main reasons I started to develop this children-oriented art program over the last 10 years, experimenting with new forms of narration and formats. So Capitaine Futur is a narrative device, a media for telling the metaphorical stories of our connected world in the tradition of extraordinary voyages and philosophical tales of the Renaissance, this specific and comparable time in Europe marked by an acceleration of technical progress. We've produced three main Capitaine Futur digital arts exhibitions based on a strong narrative and sensory approach, taking children and the novices inside all of us at this time of changes. So taking us on journeys into the depths of an abstract era of machines for a moment of thought, encouraging critical and reflective thinking about technologies, participation with the five senses, and opening new learning ways. From this sort of research action project, we also have developed in 2017 Les Voyages de Capitaine Futur, a European collaboration based on the character whose travels introduce children to digital art and to creative use of technology to discover the world we are building, and which serve as tools for emancipation and learning. As for my second example, I will be quicker. It's our ongoing exhibition, but unfortunately still closed right now due to all what we know. The exhibition is called Faire Corps, and the French visual artists Claire Barden and Adrien Mondeau have created a powerful, absorbing, spatial and monumental experience in which we immerse ourselves in swaths of shadow and rays of light, at turns flicking a finger or moving our entire body. Their large, hypersensitive entity, which vibrates and breathes in reaction to our presence, reflects our complex and interconnected contemporary world of media. and is leading us to reconsider in symbolic terms how we occupy the tangible yet immaterial space with which we are fusing, faire corps in French, through a mechanism of continual osmosis and intimate symbiosis. I think I'm done. Annick, I hope I was on time.
I have to unmute myself. Yes, thank you. Sorry. I was trying to read the questions in the Q&A and the chat at the same time. Yeah, I have one question for you because the Gaieté Lyrique and both Capitaine Futur and Claire Barden and Adrien Mondo are obviously digital art, and it's your goal at the Gaieté Lyrique. So is it more, I mean, would you use more digital tools to mediate those artworks, or would you prefer to go back to some analog tools? I'm watching actually more and more analog tools like a notebook and a pen as mediating tools in this kind of environment. So what is your...
I think we live, this type of art we are presenting at Gaieté Lyrique is mixed. So it's both physical and immaterial. So, and we would like not to focus on one language or another, but just to say that it's at the end it's one, and it's just one world, physical and immaterial, and we are going from one to the other. So analog or technological, that it's not a real question at the end.
And there is one question for you here is, what is exactly the post-internet culture? You can answer in one sentence. In one sentence.
So it's always difficult to just have a keyword for all these heterogeneous and transdisciplinary practices. So it's not easy, but sometimes we call it media art, sometimes we call digital art. And now, because we have the social internet behind us now, and it's a real impact on all the artistic practices, and not only. So right now we use this term because all these artistic practices are emerging with internet art, and internet transforms these practices. So it's not easy to give just one sentence for this world.
Yeah, I would say it's that it's when the digital online life is leaking into the physical, tangible life. So it's we're not only going to the digital, but back to the physical.
At the beginning, it was the definition. The post-internet was online,
leaking into the physical. Thank you, Joss. And now our last speaker is Gregoire Russo, so from Finland and actually all over Europe, if I understood correctly. Gregoire, it's your...
It's my turn. Yes. So I am Gregoire Russo. I will situate myself a bit before going into details what happened in the French Institute, and then what is my work and research in the wider sense regarding digital commoning and radical digital practices. In the first place, I graduated as electronic engineer. So I had my life a bit in the industry. Then after years of industry and professional work, I switched to work in Fine Art Academy, where I've been teaching for 10 years and where I developed the first space dedicated to programming, coding, electronics in the wide sense. So it was very experimental. It was a kind of laboratory where students would come and then they would discuss and develop their work in this frame. So after that, I went to work as fully artist. I found some freedom again. And in February, the French Institute in Helsinki asked me to think of what could be a space in relation to digital art, technology, and artistic practice. So this was the first frame that got me into the exhibition that is happening now, full November. The departing question in the French Institute, what I had in mind in terms of curatorial practice, was how can we invest the place, how can we use the space in a way that we do not disrupt the space at the same time, so that technology and digital can have its own input without breaking what is already happening and without breaking what should and must happen in a library in a French institute. Because I think it's very important to think that a French institute and the library, or mediathèque, as we say in French, is as well a social space, meaning that even if we are in the situation that Josse referred, that makes things way more complicated, it's still a space when one talks to another. The mediathèque, maybe you take a book and then you discuss with someone, and then you can share something. There is something social happening as well. So I wanted the works to be in this space, to engage in the same way, not to disrupt the space by having like boom, a big projection, and then boom, another something that moves, that would more break what is supposed to happen in the French Institute. So that's why I work with 6 artists. Each of them have different practices. The 6 artists are Felipe de Avila from Brazil, which work and research is more about polluted soil and how to find form out of it. Then I invited Steve Boras and François Bianco, who are based in Paris. I met them during my residency last year as well. And for the occasion, they had a record release, a 12-inch release, and they made a video out of it. Then I work with Flora Bouteille and Victor Villafani, who are based in Paris as well. Yassine Khaled, who is working with this long-term project, Monitorman, very interesting project on how distance and dialogue can happen through technology. Then Joachim Pusenius, who is based in Helsinki. His work is particularly interesting because it's the one work that relates to the transfer of analog technology into digital. Joachim's been working a lot with 16 millimeters, 8 millimeters. And for this exhibition, I asked him to work specially on that. So he could find in quite short period of time some 16 millimeters footage that he has been using for another project in Le Fresnois. So he could use this previous analog footage and use it in digital, trying to find a new form and articulate a language out of it. And I worked as well with Nicolena Stilianu from Cyprus, who is working with sound and audio. And she's researching very actively the John Cage methodology. She went to the New York archive, work on it, and she is still in the research trying to build how to use it in new context. What is following now was how to put those objects, those artworks in the space so that it would make sense. I asked each artist to bring three things to the table. One object that would relate to a video, the video itself, and a book, so that those 3 parts of the installation would be an entry point to the work, then the video work installed on a small Raspberry Pi, and then a book so that it would produce a discussion, hopefully, so that the social link would still exist. So this is what's happening now in the French Institute. Now, to broaden the discussion a bit, I would like to discuss Station of Commons. As you mentioned, is the online platform that I co-founded together with Juan Gomez, who is based in Geneva. Maybe I could share the screen and show the website at this point. So this is the this is the website, and this is where most of the events are listed. So in November Numeric, you may have some look on the pictures and the different artworks, the link to the different artists. What dragged my interest into the Station of Common project is about digital commoning and how artistic practice can really appropriate technology within the digital space. How to think what may be radical artistic practice in digital space. So to develop both the discourse and the practice, we made the website where you will find situated tutorials that which each of them depart from a very practical situation. For instance, if we look at this one, there is a full tutorial on how to install audio server, how to set up ops properly, how anyone can actually organize live streaming event, being audio or video, using only open source. So this is as well one way to find distance from the corporate and the market that really pushes to the point that there is no choice to use only Zoom or to use only Teams. We are really working hard trying to promote alternative ways of sharing, because sharing is one core value in digital practices. And just to be precise, it's sharing in the sense of open source, not sharing in the basic sense of a pie, meaning that if you have a pie, the more you share, the less there is pie. No, it's not. Digital commoning practices are not like that. Digital commoning practices rely very much on open source methodology, way of doing and thinking. Open source works in a way that, okay, someone produces a piece of software, then it's public, anyone can access it, anyone can use it, anyone can reappropriate it, work with it. So it's at the same time a way to promote it so that more people get to know about it, more people get to use it. And it's as well a way to improve. So the idea is that the software is shared, you can appropriate for yourself, work on it, improve it, and then share again. So it's an act of sharing that is productive at the same time. And it's this kind of methodology that we really want to push forward and that we really believe in, because as we are seeing now, if we want to put in context the idea of commons, then it relates and reflects very much on the idea of public and private. And as we may see the digital, but unfortunately not only the digital, everything that is public, let's say health, let's say water, most importantly, education is in the process of being privatized. And if we want to find counter strategy to this very much neoliberal policies, we need to come together. We need to gather a great variety of knowledge. We need to talk with educators. We need to talk with curators. We need to talk with artists. We need to talk with architects. And this is as well very important in commoning practices, not only digital commoning practices, but commoning practices in general, how we can learn from each other so that we can move on together. In all those contested spaces that one can find in practice. And as I happen to be electrical engineer, I find more naturally my field of action being digital space. So this is the framework briefly on what I work on and what I'm trying to do now. If you have questions, of course.
Thank you, Gregoire. Thank you all. I think it's like you raised, for me, a very interesting topic about the tutorial sharing and peers-to-peers.
Exactly.
And there is a trend currently in the museums where the audience is solicited to co-create by different tools or by sending feedbacks or things like that. And there is a question somewhere in the chat about what's your opinion, all of you, about the role of social media. in the way museums are connecting to their audience. So maybe this is something you could all answer. But I think this idea that the audience can be the mentors or the teachers to each other when they visit the museum could be something quite interesting. Gregoire, would you like to? Again, it's more of a comment about what you said.
I would not have a strong stand towards social media. I mean, with all the problematic it raised at once, but I would like much more to talk about the peer-to-peer technology, which is something very important as well, because then it questions the infrastructure of communication and who owns the means of communication, the means of production. This is much more important for me. Because peer-to-peer, the idea behind peer-to-peer that is mostly known at the time we speak by torrent files, which is very efficient way to share knowledge, to share movies, PDF, and so on, is decentralized, meaning that the communication from one to another doesn't have to go through the same central that can do whatever with data. Because I guess that we all know nowadays in the digital world that data is the big issue nowadays. That the data flow, who control the data flow, who processes the data flow, who manage the data flow, controls, has a huge amount of power and control. So peer-to-peer is the idea that information, or whatever it may be, doesn't go through this centralized topology of network, but goes directly one to another. So this is way more interesting. And this is as well one project of Station of Commons that we would like to do. This still in the process because it's quite technologically challenging. Would be to build a decentralized library. And if we want to talk about interesting practices that relate to this knowledge sharing much more than social media, it's very interesting to talk about shadow libraries, for instance. How knowledge can be gathered by some people and then shared in a very collective ways, because it brings together many questions that I actually have learned a lot about shadow libraries, knowledge, because of thanks to techno-feminism. I looked many lectures by Cornelia Solfrank, for instance, extremely inspiring artistic practice. And this is what interests me more than the social media, how many followers, Instagram.
I was not necessarily thinking about the role of social media.
I am a bit provocative sometimes.
Okay, so maybe we go into the general discussion now. I would like to thank you all for sharing your experiences and raising even more questions and issues that we had at the beginning. I have one question which comes from what you have all said is, if I pick up on everybody, and one of the questions that I see in the chat, but on Kirsten, people first, not technology. On the chat, there was one question about what are we measuring in the social interaction? Is it the social interaction about the technology itself, or the knowledge that we try to communicate? And I would like just to come back to this idea of what is a museum for. Are we trying to use those technology for a richer interaction between the visitor and the artwork that is about, or the artifact that is collected in the museum? And there has been those three approaches, one of what the technology can be used for. One is for diffusion, the delivery. The museum is delivering something to an audience. A second perspective has been the relation that is, the museum is expecting the audience to send the feedback, and it's not only the museum talking to the audience, but the audience talking back. And the third one is participatory and immersive. And also there is something that none of you has really addressed, which is, when is this interaction occurring? Is it before the visit, during the visit, or after the visit in the local, in the on-site museum? So would you have any, has anyone any feedback on this, or what we're trying to communicate really? You can raise your hands.
Just to just to answer the question, how to measure or find out whether an experience was more like a technological gimmick or if it was more profound. I guess it's about asking the right questions. For instance, what have you learned, or like how much time do people spend with an experience? I guess that would give you indications whether something was just about experiencing something wow in technology, or whether it's about a story that touches you, or something that is more personalized, and or something that is very interesting that you learn about. So I think it's what Kirsten pointed out, like that evaluation is just key in order to get to the bottom of how people experience things and what works for them and what not. On the other hand, I would maybe say that all experiences that are sensorial and more of a bodily nature are automatically like negative, and all you want is the learning aspect all the time. Maybe that's a bit premature to mention as well. Yours was talking about like the importance of like more bodily experiences, and I'd agree with that. So yeah, I think it's a difficult one, to say the least.
Kirsten?
So in terms of the museum, some years ago I co-authored a book called The Connected Museum, and I think this is in a sense, as I see it, encapsulating some of the options but also obstacles that we face today, that digital technologies help extend connections and relations and modes of communication, but it also comes with a price. And I would like to, I mean, this speaks to your question, Anik, what is a museum? It's much more than physical buildings and collections, and it can't be defined just by way of the collections that you hold. It's more relational, it's dynamic, it's changing, and it's connected to also the digital sphere. But I think it comes at a price, and I'd like to mention two challenges. One is inequities for audiences. We have to remember that almost half of the world's population don't have access to the internet. I mean, we come from a kind of technology-rich, developed part of the world. But even within Europe, there are stark inequities in terms of access, in terms of literacy, in terms of being able to use it. And that also goes for children and young people. So I think we should be mindful of the fact that the extended or the connected museum comes with challenges about inequities of access and use. And the second point is maybe that's speaking to Gregoire's talk about the peer-to-peer sharing. I think we need to be mindful of the fact that most museums use commodified platforms for marketing purposes, for getting in touch with the audiences. And we have only begun to address the vast ethical consequences of providing big platform providers with audience data. Museums who are often in the service of public value and are often funded by public money, gladly hand out, or not willingly or unwillingly hand out data. And so I think that's a real challenge, because you could then say, as Gregoire says, okay, we just forget about the big five, just forget about all the commodified platforms. We have to make alternatives. But again, most people use these platforms. So if you want a wide audience, if you want to reach the widest possible audiences, you can't get away from using digital platforms. So I think we also have to address really important ethical issues, how the public domain can handle those kinds of challenges. And that goes for the big parts of the the cultural sector in Europe, which is often defined as part of the public domain.
This is for me, this is one of the key questions with those digital technologies used in the museum, together with the inequality in terms of access to the equipment. And for instance, even, and there are more questions coming here, so I'm going to read them for you, because, and it's, I mean, when you go to a museum which is using AR with QR code, and you have to use latest technology cell phone to be able to read the damn QR code, and if you don't have it, well, you can't experience the work. So I think this is an issue. This is also an issue when you are supposed to have an enhanced experience of a palace with a hidden room, except with VR, except you need to download a super last technology software, and on top of that have headset in your private home. So whom are we really addressing? And there is a question, I have lost it already, yeah, which is how can those technologies in the museum be more inclusive and accessible, and including older people and disabled people. And do you have experiences of that, for instance, for visual impaired people or audio impaired people, where those technologies could really help? But to sum up my question, aren't those technology actually reaching out to the people that are already the users of a museum and of a social category? Nikita, Bo, Jos.
Isn't it a matter of universal design, really? That maybe you're thinking about visually impaired people, you start thinking about to maybe increase the size of your texts. It's like maybe these questions are very hands-on, and I feel like there's a lot of material in museum circles already about that. So I think in theory, museums could do it, but maybe it often goes against like the conceptual vision behind an exhibition, for instance. Then decisions are made actually against universal design principles, which would actually help people to get more access, or to help people to make things a bit more accessible and more readable.
Maybe I'm going to ask our friends from the French Institute to forward us the question. Marie, Eleonore, is there questions from the audience? Oh yeah, there is one about how can we use social media in the museum to attract and develop new audiences. And there is the Museum of London, which is using TikTok, for instance. So is it something that you would like to include in your practice? I don't know, Jos?
I think it's part of the reflection, of course, all the social medias, but we are to complete what Gregoire said about open source culture, and we were at the beginning of Legateric 10 years ago at a good place to put all this reflection in advance. But in the same time, we are all today we are all on Zoom, or we are all on Meetup Google, and the open source community has not succeeded to give us open source tools to communicate today. So it's a pity. But yes, TikTok, Instagram, and all the others, of course, they are in the middle of the reflection at Geteleric, but we don't have. They are not right now partners of the place, but it's a question of time.
Do you have any questions for each other? Do you want to react to each other presentations?
Yeah, I would like to ask Bo a question, if I may, which is about this combination of communication and technology that you talked about in the beginning. How does that translate into regarding user experiences and taking that into account? Is that an important factor in what you do, or are you more on the technological side of things?
I would say that it's probably the most important factor, and I think that is one thing that is it's very easy to fall into, like the pitfall of new technology and be very enthusiastic over virtual reality or augmented reality and all of these technical experiences that seems very like, oh wow, you can do anything. But if you starting to think a little further, and also how to actually reach out, and how do you want to distribute this? How are people going to use this? What is an actual real world use case of whatever you're building? I think that's the only way when you're starting to do any interesting work. And then of course the user experience is the most central thing. There is no way around it. No one is interested in a technical dismal thing that you're building. People want an experience that they can use and that they can have a meaningful meaningful experience of. So that's why we always have to focus on what the user actually wants and how to create interest for what we're building. And then I think that kind of transitions into the discussion about social media, because that is a really good way of reaching out. But of course you are playing on someone else's field. You are playing into these big companies, and you have to follow their rules to get gain, to get use of their distribution. If you want to reach out to all these people, it comes at a cost. Yes, you can reach out to millions of people by building an AR experience on Instagram or Snapchat. And we utilize that for a lot of our clients, because that removes the need of downloading an app or building something complicated on the web. We can just build an experience inside of the social media platforms that everyone in the target audience is already using. But of course you are doing it at a big cost. You are doing it on their terms, and you are in their lap, so to speak, when it comes to data sharing, privacy, everything. And especially now with TikTok, it's also about security.
Well, sorry, it's going to be a bit disorganized, but I've precise questions for Nikita. And it says, I'm a Norwegian, it says, with glasses, it says better. I'm a Norwegian museum guide at Stavanger Museum. and we are struggling to implement tech in our museum because of technical issues with VR, iPad, etc. How has your experience been at the Munch Museum? Unmute yourself.
Sorry. This question was related to VR, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. No, I think it's a great question. Well, we only did one VR project at Munch, which was 3 years ago. We did it for the Frankfurt Book Fair, in which we've been participating for the last years. One of the areas there, which is a bit more tech oriented. So we've never done VR at our museum. And I mean, there's a reason for that. And the problem described here in the question feels very familiar, because I think virtual reality is such a difficult technology, especially in a museum context. It's very difficult to handle in terms of maintenance and hygiene, not least, especially now it's really becomes a nightmare. It's expensive to run, it's expensive to produce. The technology is still a bit flawed, and I'm not sure if museums are really in the position to solve these issues. Maybe we rather have to leave it to I don't know, tech labs and universities or the video game industries to solve these for us. But also then that there are such strong bodily reactions to VR, which is of course what makes it so great and interesting, but also people get nauseous or they can have very unpleasant experiences. So I feel like there are a lot of pros and cons, and maybe for within a museum context where you don't have the big resources and you maybe don't have the time to really go into a long development phase, maybe the cons outweigh a bit the pros. I think it's a fascinating medium, but I think it's very difficult to apply.
Thank you. Well, as far as I'm concerned, I don't really. There is something which is very disturbing for me. I would say is this use of this wording, meaningful experience. What exactly is a meaningful experience? This is a real question for me, and it goes again back to what is a museum today. Do you want to have to do something better, so to speak, for the existing audience, or do you want to reach out to new audiences? And how do you deal with the conflict between local audience and global audience? There is a real imbalance here and real difficulty in the audience that really go to the museums and the one that have experience from afar. For me, it's a kind of soup where we have all the buzzwords and the keywords, and we're super happy playing with technology, be they proprietary with the big names or alternative with the commons and peer-to-peers. It doesn't matter. It's the same enthusiasm. What do we really want to achieve here? This is I have this feeling that the museums are, in French we say, running after their shadows. When you run after your shadow, obviously you're never going to catch it, right? So it's kind of, we want to be modern, or and we don't really. There is also this obsolescence of all the tools by the time they are ready. By the time you have really fine-tuned everything, you have to throw the damn technology away because it's no longer new. So we'd like to have your reactions about this, if there is any reaction to have.
Yeah, I think meaningful experience, I mean, it is very, very subjective, of course. But I think every time, I mean, I don't work at a museum, I don't run a museum. I sometimes have built things for museum, but then we try to build what they asked and just make it a little bit better. But I think anytime, no matter where you are, in a museum or working at a very commercial brand, and you're trying to change something that you have that is physical and you're replacing it with something digital, you really have to ask yourself why. And maybe that's even a broader thinking, that every time you do something, you have to ask yourself, why are we doing it this way? Why should we use VR for this? Why should we use augmented reality for this? Why should we use a digital screen in this museum when we are just making it worse? Maybe just throwing screens into a museum full of artifacts doesn't do anything at all. Maybe it's just better to see the physical artifacts in wonderful detail and perfectly lit. That would be much better than putting a screen in there, unless you have a very good reason to put the screen in there. We put the screen in because then we can do something that we couldn't do otherwise. And we have the physical artifact there, and we add the screen, and on the screen we can do something that we couldn't do in real life. So it's just, I think, a matter of asking yourself the reasoning why you would do anything. And the answer to that is never because it is new or people are interested. They are not. No one is interested in new technology just because it's new technology. People are interested in new things because then it could give them a meaningful experience of something that they couldn't otherwise get, something that they couldn't have experienced before without this new technology.
But could you give examples? Because and also I think the where is important. I mean, if it's something to prepare your visit, or if it's something after the visit. I mean, you know, in the Louvre, there was those cardboards, big paper boards that were in every room, and you would take one and they would have a description of each item and you could learn more things. If you had not a high level of knowledge, it was super difficult because they used a lot of technical terms. But they were super efficient in terms of providing you an in-depth information about the objects you were seeing. So now you put that you have a QR code with a tag in your cell phone, but what does it really brings to the experience? I mean, what you need is something that you understand and not labeled with words only for curators, right? So I think this is okay. Now, if I want, if you go to an exhibition and you come back and you're disturbed because there are a lot of things, before you were buying the book of a catalog, now catalogs are just nice pictures books for illiterate people. So maybe you could get something online with MOOC, for instance, or yes, Gregoire, you were talking about tutorials, but you could have online classes or online tutorial or things like that could be provided to the audience. I mean, the question of timing of synchronous and asynchronous accessibility or availability of those tools, or for me, something which is quite important. So I don't know if you have any comment about that. And there is one question here that says, it's for all of you. Do you have any good example of technologies used to create social interaction in museums, that is, get visitors to talk, engage with each other? And it's relating to Kirsten remark that those technologies currently are separating people, and that people, instead of having interaction among themselves. So this is, yeah, Kirsten.
So I can start. Yes, I think the example I gave from the planetarium in Copenhagen, I mean, our research very much shows that the result of the co-design process really works, because the technologies used props to assist a social conversation, and they don't isolate people, but people begin to ask questions. So for example, before they even enter the exhibition, there is a wedding ring, and so people can begin, I mean, most people can rely, even young people can rely to a wedding ring, and begin to have conversations about wedding rings. All people, or many people, have some sort of memories about that, or have some sort of association to that, and then begin to have a conversation about where do different minerals come from. So that starts the kind of narrative that I gave you as an example, that it should be related to people's everyday lives. And this is also an example of how to create a meaningful experience, because I think it's important for museums to remember that most meaningful experiences to some groups are not meaningful to others. So what digital technologies do is that they invite and enforce museums to rethink their modes of interacting with the audience, and to, in a sense, begin to unpick that the audience is not one thing, which is somebody like me, well-educated, being able to go to the Louvre or going to Paris in the first place, for those of us who don't live there. So, I mean, I think digital technologies have the important kind of side effect of enforcing museums to begin to revisit their modes of interacting with the surrounding world. And that's very, very important. The other part is that our research clearly demonstrates that there's a mismatch between policy discourses about museum innovation and then what really works in museums. So museum policy, both on an EU level and also on many national levels, really think that if you just put in technology, especially young people will flock to your museum because they all want to go around flashing their latest iPhone or whatever. And almost all research demonstrates this is not the case. And this is also what Bo said earlier, that there's a mismatch between what policymakers think, but that also is the way in which museums can get money for innovation. So then they have the catch-22. They are, in a sense, getting the money to put technology first, and research demonstrates you need to ask, why do I want to put in technology in the first place? But if you then say, no, I don't want technology, you don't get the money. So I think we also need to have a conversation with policymakers about widening their concept of technology use to a much more inclusive and diversified approach. And I think that would serve both museums and audiences much better.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'm not sure if you know this case, but the Arts Council England, as part of their funding schemes and programs, I think a lot of their funding is dependent on museums establishing digital strategies internally, which I think is interesting because it at least forces them to reflect on their role and what digital for them is about, and what are they going to use it for? Do you think this is potentially something that goes in the right direction, that could be implemented on a maybe bigger scale, European-wide?
Thank you. We have reached, we're even beyond our time limit. I had a tricky question that is going to be for the next Digital November of the French Institute, and which was what has the pandemic changed into the museum experience, or into the way the museum are, what are the lessons learned from the lockdown during this pandemic. So it's going to be for the next roundtable. So I would like to thank you all, the six of you, no, the five of you very much for your participation, sharing your projects and ideas. We thank the French institutes over Nordic country very much for having made this roundtable possible. And hopefully we'll see each other for real sometime and somewhere. I suppose Göteborg is closer to where I live.